Hi, thank you for joining me for another Dear Sam Horse Help Horsemanship series. So, this week I wanted to discuss why the human insists on continuing. And I know that may sound funny because we're supposed to be making progress with our horse, but it's very hard as I work with a multitude of horses who come from often other training, we'll say programs, um, we'll say other training situations where there has been patterned obedient behavior that has been conditioned into the horse. And so there's not much thinking or availability to adapt depending on what's going on in the moment. So it creates very insecure and dysfunctional horses as soon as anything in their world changes. And, there's so much of the time that humans get into the sport of horses because initially there's an emotional desire for a connection with the equine. And yet, somehow along the way, we start fixating on goals and task accomplishment and what we have to do. And if we're keeping up with our riding friends, and if our horse is a certain age, that he must be accomplishing X, Y, and Z. And the real challenge with this is that we are completely missing the ability to see what is happening in front of us. So, a few examples of things that I commonly see is someone has a difficult time catching their horse, but they will tell me, but when I ride him, he's fine. Someone who says, oh, I wish every time we got to the horse trailer, he didn't stop 2 or 3 times and take a couple minutes before he got in. Every time someone goes to get on, their horse gently takes a step or two away or backwards, moving out of proximity for the human to mount. They get after the horse, they try it a few times, they get on, they go, well, it's not that bad. If every time someone's riding out and they go, my horse is so great, as long as he is in X position within the group of horses that are out on the trail. Otherwise, it can be challenging. But as long as I'm there in the position he likes, we're fine. Every time someone goes to ask for a transition into a faster gait and the horse seemingly gets piped up energy wise, and people tell me, oh, he's having so much fun because he can no longer come back to a slower, soft, balanced gait after he's been asked to move out a bit. There are so many things and indicators that the horse is completely honest about in his communication that are completely written off by the human. And because of this, it's often taught, unfortunately, to the human student to just keep going, to just add more pressure, whether it's stronger on the lead rope, stronger on the rein, stronger with your seat and leg, in the sense of basically driving the horse through, stronger with the whip or the magic stick or anything else like that to get that horse to load in the trailer or to make him yield, that we forget that the horse is being honest, and we somehow lose our ability to empathize with what the horse is experiencing because we have this tunnel vision on what it feels like to us and our goal of trying to accomplish something. And the best analogy I can offer is if you had a car that was leaking oil, and all cars need oil to run, and you just kept putting fuel in the car, gasoline, and you kept driving the car, eventually it would break down. And you would keep, if you kept saying, yes, but I put fuel in, but I kept adding more fuel. It doesn't matter that you added more fuel. You weren't addressing the issue, which was that your car had an oil leak, or even if you capped off the oil leak and tried to keep, topping it up, if you didn't address that leak, eventually with enough driving, it would start to get worse and worse. And so the car would leak oil faster and in larger quantities until eventually the car comes to the same endpoint of no longer being able to be run. But when it comes to 1,200-pound emotional prey animals, somehow many people are under the illusion that if we just add more pressure, things will get better. So my question is, if you go to tack up your horse and he's consistently on the verge of pulling back or moving away from you being touched or moving away from the saddle being put on him, if you go to get on your horse and he's constantly backing up and moving away, if you go to load your horse in the trailer and he's constantly pausing and thinking backwards and showing tension and concern and fear, if you're riding your horse and at a certain point it feels like he's taking over in fast, dramatic, unwanted, unasked for physical responses, at what point do we stop and say or acknowledge that however we're doing things is no longer working? And I bring this up because most of the horses that I get that are what I would call the problem horses, the dangerous horses, the what people will classify as stubborn or resistant horses, are all reflections of humans ignoring the horse. And this is something that's not talked about. You can go and sign up for any online, DVD course that's going to teach you the magic way to disengage that horse's hindquarters, and you make him be respectful and you make him stand still. And so many teachings out there, unfortunately, reinforce this concept that horsemanship comes from a place of ego and that it's about the challenge of making that horse listen. And to be honest, you may, depending on the horse, depending on his confidence, depending on his physical ability, you might be able to sneak through in that manner for a while. But at some point, it's going to come back. At some point, all of that containment, whether it's mental, emotional, concern, fear, stress, physical tension, is going to explode. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I bring up this point in this video because so many people that ask for help are coming from a place of good intention, but have not maybe heard that perhaps they need to stop, and rather than looking at the horse initially, look at themselves, look at what they are basing their, we're going to say, quality experiences on, meaning, is the horse mentally available? Is he emotionally calm? And is he physically soft in his behavior? Versus, did he accomplish the task that you asked, but he was tight and tense and rushed through it, and it took a bunch of times, but eventually he did it and complied? Because whatever the feeling is that the horse is offering behind the experience or after the experience or scenario that you've asked of him is what he's carrying forward to the next thing that you ask. And it can be a totally different scenario. But if you are teaching your horse to be obedient and contained every time you ask something of him, you're basically putting him in, we'll say, the proverbial pressure cooker. And at some point, the pressure becomes too much, and he, as people say, all of a sudden explodes, when it really was not all of a sudden. So I say this out of I'll say, warning, so that perhaps you can maybe time out for a moment, maybe take a few breaths, maybe really look at yourself. And again, it's very hard for people to be honest with themselves about maybe things that they didn't know, things that they didn't understand in horse behavior, and that's okay. But there is always an opportunity with each interaction with the horse to have a different empathy for him, to have an acknowledgement of his feedback and communication, which is honest, and to experiment with how you are offering communication so that you can perhaps start to have different conversations that have value to the horse and you, and are building his curiosity, are building his confidence, are building his willingness to try, versus the more you ask of him, the less he offers and the more defensive and resistant he gets. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.